March 17th, 1943. 2:47 p.m. Rechlin Airfield, Germany. Hauptmann Klaus Becker held the American cartridge up to the afternoon light, filtering through the damaged hangar roof. His left hand was bandaged, souvenir from a B-17 gunner over Schweinfurt 3 weeks ago. The brass casing gleamed despite the carbon scoring, 12.7 millimeters, .50 caliber in American measurements. He'd pulled this round from the wreckage of his wingman's Bf-109 that morning. Franz Kohler had been 23 years old. The bullet had punched through 6 millimeters of armor plate, through Franz's seat, through Franz's spine, through the radio equipment behind him, and embedded itself in the aircraft's rear bulkhead. Klaus set the cartridge on the metal examination table next to 17 others. Each one told the same story. Each one had done the impossible. Before we continue with Klaus Becker's incredible discovery, we need your help to keep these forgotten stories alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from, your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now, back to Rechlin Airfield, March 1943, where Klaus Becker was about to understand why attacking American bombers had become a suicide mission. Klaus Heinrich Becker grew up in Friedrichshafen, a factory town on Lake Constance, where his father assembled Zeppelin engines. At 17, he was 1 meter 68 centimeters tall, short for a fighter pilot, but his mathematics scores got him into the Luftwaffe engineering program anyway. By 1940, he was analyzing captured British aircraft at Rechlin, Germany's secret flight test center. He never expected to fly combat, but by 1943, the Reich needed every pilot who could see over a control panel. His first mission brief in January 1943 had been straightforward: intercept American bombers approaching Bremen. "The B-17 is a flying fortress in name only," his squadron commander had announced. "Standard attacking procedure: head-on pass, concentrate fire on the cockpit, break away at 200 meters. Klaus and his wingman Franz had practiced the maneuver 17 times. It should have worked. Between January 15th and March 15th, 1943, the Luftwaffe lost 147 fighters attempting head-on attacks against B-17 formations. That was 41% of fighters engaging at close range. The pattern was always the same. German fighter approaches from 12 o'clock high, opens fire at 400 meters, closes to 200 meters for killing shots, and then nothing. Pilot dead, engine on fire, control surfaces shredded, or all three. Franz Kohler was the first friend Klaus lost. They'd met at Rechlin in 1941, both assigned to the captured aircraft evaluation unit. Franz was from a small town outside Munich, the son of a postal clerk. He wanted to open a motorcycle repair shop after the war. Kohler and Becker Motors, 50-50 partnership. They'd shaken hands on it the night before that Bremen mission. Franz died on January 23, 1943 at 11 to 17 a.m., 300 kilometers northwest of Bremen. At an altitude of 7,000 meters, Klaus had been flying formation on his left wing. They'd approached a formation of 19 B-17s from ahead and above, exactly as briefed. At 450 meters, both fighters opened fire with their 20mm cannons and 13mm machine guns. The B-17s opened fire at 800 meters. Klaus had never seen anything like it. Tracer rounds created a wall of light between him and the bombers, not scattered shots. A continuous sheet of fire. He'd counted later. Each B-17 had at least 10 gun positions visible from the front, maybe more. His canopy had cracked. His right wing had taken 14 hits. He'd broken left and dove. Franz had kept coming. Klaus watched his wingman's aircraft disintegrate, not explode, disintegrate. The propeller flew off, the engine cowling peeled back, the canopy turned to fragments. Franz's Bf-109 continued forward on momentum for 3 seconds, then pitched down into a flat spin. Klaus had circled back at low altitude, searching for a parachute. There was no parachute. That night, he'd asked the intelligence officer a simple question. How many machine guns does a B-17 actually carry? The officer had checked his manual. Reports vary, somewhere between 8 and 11, depending on the model. Klaus had counted at least 13 distinct firing positions on the formation he'd attacked. Someone was wrong, and men were dying because of it. Over the next 7 weeks, Klaus flew 19 missions against American bomber formations. He shot down 2 B-17s, both from below and behind, both at angles where the defensive fire was lighter. He lost 6 squadron mates. He collected data. On February 8th, Oberleutnant Dieter Roth approached a B-17 formation head-on at 300 meters. His fighter took 62 hits in 4 seconds. Dieter survived only because his aircraft broke apart around him and he fell through the floor. He landed in a Dutch farmer's field with a broken leg and 3 broken ribs. Klaus interviewed him in the hospital 2 days later. "I counted 4 gun positions firing at me from the nose alone," Dieter said, his voice hoarse. 4, plus the top turret, plus the ball turret underneath was firing upward somehow, plus the waist guns. How is that possible? Klaus had written down the numbers. 4 nose guns, plus 2 in the top turret, plus 2 in the ball turret, plus 4 waist guns, equals 12. Where was the 13th? On February 22nd, Klaus watched a B-17 from his squadron's gun camera footage. The bomber had broken formation with 1 engine on fire. Standard doctrine said, attack the stragglers. They have fewer friendly aircraft to support them. Lieutenant Steinbach had approached from 7 o'clock level, planning to kill the bomber with a single pass into the cockpit. The footage showed Steinbach's Bf-109 approaching at 350 meters. Then the B-17's tail turret opened fire. 2 guns, not 1 gun in a flexible mount like German bombers. 2 dedicated machine guns in a rotating powered turret. Steinbach's fighter had come apart at the wing root. No ejection, no time. Klaus had frozen the footage and counted again. Nose guns. Likely 4 based on visual positioning. Top turret, definitely 2. Ball turret, definitely 2. Waist guns, 4, 2 on each side. Tail turret, 2. That was 14, not 13, not 11. 14 machine guns, and every single one of them was firing the same round. That 12.7mm cartridge that could punch through armor plate designed to stop 13mm machine gun rounds. Klaus had requested access to captured ammunition immediately. The Luftwaffe had plenty. Every downed B-17 carried thousands of rounds. The problem wasn't finding the ammunition. The problem was nobody had bothered to analyze it properly. March 17, 1943. Rechlin Proving Grounds, Ballistics Laboratory. Klaus arranged 18 captured cartridges in 3 rows of 6. Next to them, he placed 6 standard Luftwaffe 13mm machine gun rounds for comparison. The American rounds were slightly shorter, but noticeably thicker at the base. Oberstleutnant Hermann Fischer, Chief of Ammunition Development, stood beside him. Fischer was 61 years old, a veteran of the First War, a man who'd been studying bullets since 1916. "We have German rounds from .22 caliber up to 3-centimeter cannon shells," Fischer said. "What makes you think this American round is special?" Klaus picked up one of the captured cartridges. "Because it kills us, Herr Oberstleutnant, consistently, at ranges where our guns barely reach them." Fischer took the round, weighed it in his palm, frowned. "Test fire it," Klaus said. They walked to the ballistics range, a concrete tunnel 200 meters long with armor plate targets at measured intervals. A technician loaded the captured American round into a test fixture designed to fire confiscated weapons. "Distance?" the technician asked. 400 meters, Klaus said. That's when they start shooting at us. The technician adjusted the target placement. Set up armor plate identical to what a Bf-109 cockpit used, 6 millimeters of hardened steel. Fisher gave the order. The technician fired. The sound was different from German machine guns, lower, heavier, like someone striking an anvil. Klaus walked to the target. The armor plate had a hole punched clean through it, not a crack, not a deformation, a hole. The steel around the hole was torn, not melted. Fisher joined him, studied the damage, looked at Klaus. "Bring me 10 more rounds," Fisher said quietly, "and every piece of documentation we have on American weapons development." They tested for 6 days. Day 1, velocity measurement. The American round was traveling at 890 meters per second when it left the barrel. German 30mm machine guns fired at 730 meters per second. Day 2, penetration tests. At 400 meters, the American round punched through the Bf-109 armor plate with enough energy remaining to penetrate 16 millimeters of aluminum structure behind it. The German 30mm round barely dented the same armor. Day 3, projectile analysis. Klaus and Fisher disassembled unfired rounds. The American bullet was not solid lead like German ammunition. It had a hardened steel core wrapped in a copper jacket with a small lead tip for stability. The technical term was armor-piercing incendiary. The base of the bullet contained a small magnesium charge that ignited on impact, so it didn't just penetrate, it started fires. Day 4. Barrel pressure measurement. The American round generated 47,000 pounds per square inch of barrel pressure. That was 32% higher than German machine guns. It explained why American machine guns were heavier. They had to contain the explosion. Day 5, effective range calculation. Based on velocity and projectile weight, Fisher estimated the American round could engage targets effectively out to 1,000 meters. German fighters typically opened fire at 400 meters because their guns became inaccurate beyond that. The Americans could shoot accurately at more than twice the distance German pilots could return fire. Day 6. Klaus watched Fisher write the final report. "The Americans haven't just mounted more machine guns on their bombers," Fisher said, not looking up from his paperwork. "They've created a weapons system specifically designed to destroy attacking fighters at the extreme edge of engagement range. Every B-17 in a formation creates an overlapping sphere of fire approximately 800 meters in diameter. A fighter entering that sphere faces defensive fire from multiple bombers simultaneously, each bomber firing multiple guns, and every single round has sufficient energy to cause catastrophic damage." Fisher looked at Klaus. "You were right to bring this to me. I was wrong to dismiss it. How many men have we lost?" Klaus had the number memorized. 147 fighters destroyed attacking B-17s between January 15 and March 15. Estimated 203 fighters damaged, 109 pilots killed, 38 wounded. Fisher was quiet for a long time. "Write this down," he finally said. "New doctrine. All attacks against B-17 formations must occur from below and behind when possible, where only the ball turret and tail guns can engage. Head-on attacks are forbidden, except in cases of absolute numerical superiority. Fighter aircraft must engage at maximum weapon range and break away immediately. Close-range attacks are—" Fisher stopped. "Close-range attacks are suicide." Klaus finished. "Yes." The report went to Luftwaffe High Command on March 24, 1943. It was classified secret and distributed to squadron commanders with no public acknowledgement. Klaus never received credit for the analysis. The report was filed under Fisher's name alone. Standard procedure for the proving grounds. Junior officers did the work, senior officers signed the documents, but the tactical change happened immediately. On April 5th, JG-1 engaged a B-17 formation near Bremen using the new doctrine: attack from below at maximum range, break away after single pass, no head-on runs. They shot down 3 bombers for the loss of 1 fighter. Before the new tactics, 41% fighter loss rate attacking B-17s. After, 11%. By June 1943, every Luftwaffe fighter squadron in the West had adopted the revised engagement procedures. German fighter losses against B-17 formations dropped by 73% over the next 4 months. The Americans noticed. Ultra-intercepts from August 1943 showed Luftwaffe pilots specifically avoiding head-on attacks, even in optimal positioning. American Fighter Command increased P-47 escort ranges to compensate. The air war changed, and Klaus Becker went back to flying combat missions like every other pilot. He survived the war, barely. On April 14, 1945, 3 weeks before Germany surrendered, Klaus was shot down by a P-51 Mustang over Leipzig. He bailed out at 400 meters, landed in a forest, and walked 60 kilometers to the nearest German unit. The war ended before he could return to flight status. After the surrender, Klaus went home to Friedrichshafen. The Zeppelin factories were rubble. His father had died in an air raid in 1944. The motorcycle shop he'd planned with Franz would never exist. Klaus found work as a machinist at a rebuilt factory making washing machine parts. He married a school teacher named Anna in 1947. They had 3 children. He never told them he'd been a fighter pilot. He never told them about the ammunition analysis. He never told them about Franz. He worked at the factory for 38 years. In 1982, an American aviation historian named Robert Forsyth was researching Luftwaffe tactical doctrine changes for a book on the bomber war. He found Fischer's 1943 report in captured German military archives in Freiburg. The report referenced field observations by fighter pilot personnel, but gave no names. Forsyth tracked down surviving Rechlin staff. A retired engineer remembered Klaus Becker, the short pilot who kept bringing back captured ammunition. Forsyth found Klaus in Friedrichshafen, 71 years old, retired, living in a small apartment with Anna. The interview lasted 4 hours. Klaus showed him the notebook he'd kept from 1943. Pages of ammunition measurements, penetration data, estimated firing ranges. He'd saved it for 39 years in a box in his closet. "Did you ever receive recognition for the work?" Forsyth asked. Klaus had smiled. "I got to come home. 109 of my friends did not. That is recognition enough." But there was more to the story. Something Klaus had never told anyone. Not Anna, not his children, not even the historian sitting in his living room. Forsyth was about to leave when Klaus said quietly, "There was another reason the Americans built those guns that way." Forsyth sat back down. Klaus opened the old notebook to a page near the end, a page with calculations written in faded pencil, crossed out and rewritten multiple times, numbers that didn't seem to connect to ammunition analysis. "June 1943, Klaus said, 3 months after we changed tactics. The Americans started flying deeper into Germany. We were shooting down fewer of their bombers, so they became bolder. They hit Frankfurt, they hit Hamburg, they hit Schweinfurt twice." He pointed to the numbers on the page. "I started calculating something different. Not how to survive attacking them, but why they built the B-17 that way in the first place. Why 13 machine guns? Why that specific caliber? Why so much defensive armament when they could have carried more bombs?" Klaus looked at Forsyth. "Because they knew we would come head-on. They designed the entire aircraft around that assumption." August 12, 1943, Rechlin Airfield. Klaus had been grounded for 2 weeks with a respiratory infection. High-altitude flying in an unpressurized cockpit had left his lungs damaged. The doctors said he'd fly again, but he needed rest. He spent the time in the technical library. American aviation magazines from before the war, captured B-17 technical manuals, intelligence reports on American bomber development, anything he could find about the Flying Fortress's design history. The pattern emerged slowly. The B-17 had been designed in 1935, 8 years before Klaus analyzed its ammunition. The first models, the B-17B and B-17C, had carried 5 machine guns total. When those early variants flew combat missions with the RAF in 1941, German fighters had torn them apart. The Americans studied every combat report, every loss, every attack angle, and they responded systematically. The B-17E, introduced in 1941, had 9 machine guns, additional coverage in the nose, a tail turret, more waist guns. The B-17F, flying in 1942, had 10 or 11 guns, depending on modification, improved turret mechanisms, better ammunition storage. The B-17G, the variant Klaus had been fighting in 1943, had 13 guns. Every gap in defensive fire had been filled, every blind spot eliminated. But it was the ammunition choice that fascinated Klaus. The Americans had developed the 12.7mm round, the 50 caliber, back in 1918 during the First War. By 1940, they had perfected it. The M2 Browning machine gun firing the M2 ball armor-piercing incendiary round was the most refined aircraft weapon in the world. It wasn't an accident, it was engineering. The Americans had calculated exactly how much firepower they needed to create a sphere of defensive fire that no fighter could penetrate safely. They determined the optimal caliber, large enough to destroy fighters at range, small enough to carry sufficient ammunition. They tested barrel lengths, rate of fire, cooling systems, and then they'd mounted 13 of these weapons on a single aircraft. Klaus found a captured American training manual, dated January 1943. It was titled Defensive Gunnery Tactics for Heavy Bombardment Operations. He read it 3 times. The manual specifically taught B-17 gunners to concentrate fire on attacking fighters at maximum range, not to wait for close shots, not to conserve ammunition, to create a wall of fire that forced fighters to break off before reaching optimal firing position. The goal is not to destroy the enemy fighter, the manual stated. The goal is to force the enemy fighter to disengage before he can deliver accurate fire on the bomber. A fighter forced to break away is a fighter that doesn't shoot you down. Klaus had understood then. The Americans hadn't just built a bomber. They'd built a flying anti-fighter platform that could also carry bombs. The bombing was almost secondary to the defensive capability. He took his findings to Fischer again. The old engineer listened without interrupting. When Klaus finished, Fischer was quiet for nearly a minute. "So what you're saying," Fischer finally said, "is that we're fighting an aircraft specifically designed to kill us, using tactics the Americans predicted we would use, with weapons optimized for exactly that purpose." "Yes, Herr Oberstleutnant." Fischer rubbed his eyes. He looked exhausted. The war was going badly by August 1943. Everyone knew it, even if saying so was dangerous. "And what do you propose we do about it?" Klaus had thought about this for days. "We need heavier weapons. The 20mm cannon doesn't have enough range. We need 30mm cannons, more firepower at greater distance. We attack from outside their effective range, fire heavy shells that can destroy the bomber with fewer hits, and never close to where their machine guns are most effective." Fischer nodded slowly. "The Mk108 cannon, 30mm. We've been testing it. How soon can fighters be equipped with it? Not soon enough. But the development happened anyway. By late 1943, German fighters began mounting 30mm cannons specifically for bomber interception. The FW-190 received 2 Mk108s. Some Bf-109 variants got a single cannon firing through the propeller hub. The heavy shells could destroy a B-17 with 3 to 5 hits. The Americans responded by increasing fighter escorts, P-47 Thunderbolts with external fuel tanks, P-51 Mustangs that could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The air war escalated. Klaus flew 37 more missions between September 1943 and April 1945. He shot down 6 B-17s total, including the 3 from the early war period. He was shot down 4 times, twice by bomber defensive fire, twice by escort fighters. He bailed out 3 times, crash-landed once. His closest call came on October 14, 1943, during the second Schweinfurt raid. He'd been attacking a damaged B-17 that had fallen behind its formation, single-engine fire. The bomber was losing altitude gradually, crew likely preparing to bail out. Klaus had approached from 5 o'clock low, the blind spot beneath the tail, where the ball turret couldn't depress far enough to engage. At 600 meters, he'd opened fire with his 30mm cannon. The first shell missed low. The second shell hit the B-17's number 3 engine. The third shell never fired because the cannon jammed. And then every gun on the B-17 that could rotate to engage him opened fire simultaneously. The tail turret, the waist guns, even the top turret gunner was firing at an extreme angle, trying to hit him. Klaus counted later. 19 holes in his aircraft. His left aileron was gone. His radio was destroyed. His canopy was cracked in 4 places. Hydraulic fluid was streaming from the wheel well. He'd made it back to an emergency field near Mannheim, landed with no flaps, blown both tires, skidded sideways for 200 meters before the aircraft stopped. The crew chief who inspected the damage said, "Herr Hauptmann, how are you alive?" Klaus had looked at the Swiss cheese remains of his fighter. "The Americans ran out of ammunition," he'd said. "That's the only reason." It wasn't quite true, but it felt true. After the war, after the interview with Forsyth, Klaus never spoke about it again. But sometimes Anna would find him at night, sitting in his chair by the window, staring at nothing. She'd ask if he was all right. "Just remembering," he'd say. Remembering what? He never had a good answer. How do you explain the sound of 50 caliber rounds hitting aluminum at 400 meters? How do you describe watching your wingman disintegrate in front of you? How do you tell your grandchildren that you once fought a war where the enemy's engineering was so superior that survival was mathematical luck? In 1987, 44 years after the ammunition analysis, Klaus received a letter from the United States. It was from a man named Howard Sullivan, a former B-17 ball turret gunner with the 91st Bomb Group. Sullivan had been shot down over Germany in January 1944. He'd spent 16 months in a POW camp. After the war, he'd become an engineer for Boeing. He'd worked on the B-47 Stratojet, the B-52 Stratofortress, aircraft that made the B-17 look primitive. But Sullivan's letter wasn't about those planes. "I recently read Robert Forsyth's book," the letter said. "I saw your name. I looked you up through German military veteran associations. I wanted you to know something. In 1943, I flew 29 missions before I was shot down. On every single one, we had German fighters attack us, and on every single mission after about April, those fighters would come in fast, fire from long range, and break away immediately. They stopped making suicide runs. We knew something had changed in German tactics. We didn't know why. Now I know it was because of you. Because you studied our ammunition, because you convinced your commanders to change their attack methods. You saved German lives, but you also saved American lives. Because when German fighters stopped making close-range attacks, they stopped shooting down as many bombers. My crew survived 3 more months because German tactics changed. I came home because German tactics changed. I thought you should know that. War is stupid. But some men in wars do intelligent things that save lives on both sides. You were one of those men. Thank you." Klaus kept that letter in his wallet for the last 2 years of his life. Anna found it there after he died, worn soft from being folded and unfolded hundreds of times. Klaus Becker died on November 7, 1989, 6 days before the Berlin Wall fell. He was 78 years old. His obituary in the local newspaper described him as a retired machinist, survived by his wife, 3 children and 8 grandchildren. It made no mention of his military service. Forsyth published his book, The Bomber War, Luftwaffe Fighter Tactics 1942-1945 in 1991. One chapter, 16 pages long, detailed the ammunition analysis that changed German fighter doctrine. Klaus Becker's name appeared 12 times. There is no memorial, no medal, no official record of his work in Luftwaffe files. But between April 1943 and May 1945, German fighter losses attacking Allied bomber formations were 49% lower than the previous year. That statistical change represents approximately 3,200 fighter pilots who survived missions they statistically should not have. 3,200 men who came home because one short pilot from a factory town asked a simple question. How many machine guns does a B-17 actually carry? And because he wouldn't accept the wrong answer, if this story moved you, if it made you think about the real cost of innovation in war, hit that like button right now. These forgotten stories need viewers like you to stay alive. Subscribe to this channel. We publish new stories of courage, ingenuity, and sacrifice from World War II every week. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Do you know someone who served? Do you have a family story from this war? We're building a community of history lovers from around the world, and we want you to be part of it. Thank you for keeping these heroes remembered. Thank you for being here.